Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Business Analysis Andersen Talks Meetup. This is the first gathering of our BA community in Krakow, and I'm sure this is just the beginning. Let me take a few minutes of your time to talk about two things. First, the meetup is organized by our community of business and system analysis. And apart from the meetups, our community is growing in social media, where we are sharing a lot of useful information, post our article about IT topics, and announce the meetup like this one. So follow us in Facebook and Telegram, and you will always be informed about our meetups. On screen, you can see the link to our Facebook channel, so please subscribe, follow up us in Facebook. And the second thing is, I'd like to mention that we are in the office of Andersen international company, which we are a company, software developing company, international company, and we plan to hold our meetups in our office again in the nearest future. So today we have three speakers. First one is Vladimir Fyodorov, a business analyst at our company with exclusive experience. The second one is Vitaly Birchenko, who also works in Andersen as a lead business analyst specialized in healthcare, fintech, and logistics. And our very special guest, who is not only a product manager, but also the blogger. This person is Ilona Kedracka. Each of our speakers will deliver us interesting presentation today. After each presentation, you can ask questions to the speaker, and that's it. So let's welcome our first speaker, Vladimir Fyodorov.
Hi dear colleagues, let me introduce myself. My name is Vladimir. I'm business analyst at the Andersen lab. I had been working as intermodal logistic manager for more than 6 years before I switched to business analysis. And the topic of my today report is about how it's possible to use your previous non-IT experience from so-called your past life in business analysis activity on the pre-sale phase. So let's start. Why I made my mind to choose this topic. Once our department get a request for proposal 100% compatible with my previous experience, it was 100 about what I had been working before, and I decided to be useful on the one hand to my colleagues, and on the other hand, I decided that it's better to use to work with familiar domain for the first experience with high level of responsibilities. Okay, a few words about target audience for whom it may be interesting. It's BA switchers from other domains, of course, former users, or SME, according to Carl Wigger's definition. More experienced business analysts who are organized and responsible for reviewing of pre-sales processes in big companies, and of course for other specialists involved in pre-sale phase. Shortly, let me remind about the role of business analyst in pre-sale phase, and a few words about pre-sale phase in general. Pre-sale phase is a set of activities with the task to prepare correct and convenient for both of sides of the process offer of the future solution with correct and convenient estimation before the signing of the contract. And of course, if we look from the very high level perspective, the final high level goal of pre-sale is successful sale for using convenient for both conditions for both sides. sides. Okay, responsibility of, a few words about responsibilities of business analyst at pre-sales. First of all, it's understanding stakeholders' needs, to understand stakeholders' need correctly in a very short period of time and transform it into overall vision of the product. Also, as rule, it's a kind of feature list and calculate time and time or effort estimation for the implementation of BA activities, for example, functionality, integrations, UR description, and of course, its business analyst should assist the development team, explain the overall set of requirements and functionality using the tech language, and explain sometimes them business values for features. Shortly, we can look at the very short diagram. It's a flow of business analyst activity in pre-sale phase. It's quite simple, but let me pay your attention to the second part of activities: requirement solicitation and elaboration, because sometimes the second part of pre-sale depends on how much requirements we can elicit from the customer side. This is a flow. The main question is, and the main maybe issue, do we have enough information for the estimation of future product functionality? Because sometimes it's impossible to elicit all information. Customer is not agree for interviews, and for example, his documentation is not detailed, and in this case we can evaluate him discovery phase. But we will talk about the second case more, more detailed, when we will evaluate and estimate the functionality of the product. Okay, and let's imagine the following situation. Business analyst working in pre-sales has faced with domain generally unknown to him very well. And sometimes he can meet the following issues. The first issue is a huge amount of unknown or not familiar information and terminology in the customer documentation, because sometimes it's very special technical documentation, not re-engineered, not sometimes not vision and scope or set of requirements. And what are the possible consequences of that? First of all, it's increase of it's time consumption, time and maybe money expansion for the customer, for the contractor, because more working hours. And the second consequence of this issue is more chances to miss mistakes and gaps in requirements. The second issue is connected with the first. It's sometimes customer documentation can contain absolutely contradictory information, can be written by other authors. And therefore, the task of business analyst to find what is correct and what a real customer needs. And the consequence of this is similar to the consequences from the first issue. It's more chances to miss mistakes and gaps in requirements. And the third issue is probably the most popular and well-known for business analysts. It's a lack of working in pre-sale phase. It's a lack of possibilities to specify information from the customer. Imagine the situation when customer has a lot of big list of possible contractors or service providers, and customer has no time for interviews. He wouldn't like to answer to questionnaire with details and what are the possible consequences of this issue. First of all, it's more chances to not define entities, its attributes and operations correctly, and it can provoke a lot of can cause a lot of unfounded assumptions, and as a result increase of risks, risk probability, scope creep, sometimes gold plating, and so on. What are the ways to prevent possible issues? In our company, there is a kind of approach to involve for pre-sales business analysts with previous sometimes IT, sometimes not IT experience of the user or SMA. If, for example, business analyst has only non-IT but deep experience in the business domain, he works in tandem with technical expert. Technical expert is a business analyst who specialized in pre-sales maybe more than 3, 4, 5 years with huge amount of pre-sales. Also, don't forget about knowledge sharing and teamwork. Sometimes developers and first of all architect, the UI UX designer also can be useful because of they can work. Also, they have experience not in domain but with solutions typical for domain. For example, the structure of CRM or EMS systems are plus minus the same. Okay, and now let's consider this personal case. This case was typical, but with very well-known domain, and all problems of customers were well-known for me because I had sometimes the same problems as customer. Customer was international GC company specializing in intermodal freight forwarding services. Task was typical, estimate development for a new EMS SIMR solution. Type of estimation, rough estimation, but term for estimation was short, was about 7 days. Estimation techniques, it's default technique used in Andersen, and customer request also for 3-point estimation per T technique, per T method. Scope of the work of business analyst was the same. And documentation, and few words about documentation from the customer side. Documentation was detailed. First document, it was a kind of vision and scope mix with shortened version of SRS. It was about maybe 35 pages and 2 feature lists. First feature, 2 feature lists with description. First feature list, it was features as is in old solution, which should be replaced, and the second feature list, it was to be a feature list. Which kind of issues had been detected? In spite of the very specified, really detailed customer documentation, there were detected incorrect definitions of entities and their attributes, because some objects were shown like attributes. Also, there were some issues with functional requirements, because functional requirements were documented fragmentarily and not systemized into modules. And also, it was a kind of, and not everything was okay with operations in entities. Some of operations were impossible to implement because of customer had maybe no imagination about some aspects of terminal handling charges calculating and tariff calculating, because he required impossible. For example, he didn't know about ad hoc rates and so on. And what measures to solve issues and cover gaps we used? First of all, it was revision and correction of requirements, correction hierarchy of entities, systematization of sets of operations with entities in separate modules according to user roles. And it was standard in covering gaps in functionality. Okay, and because of, I know this domain may be a little bit, not a little bit, really better than others, let me share some tips from my personal experience. First of all, these tips for analysts who begins his career of pre-sale analyst. The first tip that we shouldn't recognize, we shouldn't treat customer requirements as or customer documents as a source of truth, because of there are some reasons, because sometimes this document are inaccurate, and business analysts should look at it into the prism of of documentation analysis with a lot amount of criticism. The second tip: if we evaluate, for example, a RAM or CMR system, and we have to look it according to the OOP principle. First of all, try to define entities. Try to define attributes of these entities and operations, and of course hierarchy of the entities. Sometimes, if we are talking about features, about operations with entities, sometimes crudal metrics can help to define the set of operations, but unfortunately, sometimes we can have time for detailed usage of business analyst techniques. And the first tip is similar, because we have no time. It's only pre-sale. Sometimes we have no time for diagramming, but if we need to explain development team the structure of the solution, the scope, we can use links between entities for more complicated ties, or for more complicated links between entities. And sometimes we we don't know the real, if we don't know how much attributes can contain object, we can use a function, for example, to estimate, to use relative estimation and estimate the time, how much time, for example, for implementation of one attribute, and to use the functions that function or estimate the feature, add an attribute or add an entity or add an operation. I'm sorry, and how to... Okay, the next tip is, I guess it's important, if we add a new feature based on assumption, if, for example, customer documentation is not so full or detailed, we have to test this feature. And how to test it? We should to imagine or to test it from the customer's point of view. Does it have value for a customer or not? And of course, for these features, we can add additional comment, a short explanation why we add it. If, for example, it's necessary, if customer documentation contains feature lists, or prototypes or drafts of feature lists. If we are talking about system with roles and different access, it's better, first of all, to define a set of operations for a super user role, and after that for other roles with limited functionality, with limited set of operations. And maybe the last one, it's about soft skills, about knowledge sharing, and about corporate culture. Do not hesitate to remember that you are working in a team, and don't hesitate to consult with your teammates. Sometimes teammates with absolutely technical background, with no business experience, can take you really valuable advices. And some conclusions. Let's summarize it. Because what about value of business and analysts with relevant business experience in pre-sales, I already said, and what we have to pay attention for. First of all, I guess it was most difficult for me. It was a problem of scope creep or good plating. For example, if you know domain well, you always, if business analyst knew domain well, business analyst has a kind of temptation for gold plating or scope creep, to dive deep into details, but it's only pre-sale, we bound it in time, we have time limits, and the task of pre-sale is not deep analysis, not so deep analysis. Also, business analysts should be careful with assumption and dependencies. Sometimes necessary, but only in very important things for crucial features. Business analysts shouldn't allow the excessive use of them. And the third tip, or don't forget about your colleagues, and don't remember about peer reviews, and don't hesitate to ask your senior colleagues who has more experience for time estimation, because it's for time or effort or time and effort estimates. It depends on estimation, because of his experience is your the best advisor. So probably that's all. Thank you for your attention, and waiting for your questions. Do you have any questions?
Do you have any questions to Vitaly? Władysław? Sorry, Władysław. Questions? No? Okay. Thank you, Władysław. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now I would like to invite... Yeah. Now I'd like to invite Vitaly, our second speaker. Vitaly, stage is yours. All right, so Vitaly, stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. So good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hope we will have fun together discussing this interesting topic, BA on discovery phase. So let me introduce myself a little bit, a minute of vanity. I'm a lead business analyst at Andersen and a subject matter expert in the healthcare domain. That's why most of the cases I'll present today are somehow connected with the domain, so sorry for that. The main questions we are going to discuss today is a general idea of discovery phase, and what is the role of business analyst and artifact that he or she prepares during the phase. We'll divide the presentation into three parts. The first is the idea of discovery phase and the role of BA, the artifacts of BA on discovery phase, and how BA should communicate with the stakeholders and with the team. So, what is discovery phase? Discovery phase is the first, how to call it, a project phase when we get paid, what we get paid for. And that's why we are trying to collect as much requirements as we can. So anyway, the main idea is that it's a process of collecting and analyzing information about the project, about all the background of the project, about its intended market and maybe target audience. So if we're talking about the role of discovery phase in the software development lifecycle, we may see that it's a pity, but discovery phase is an optional phase because, yeah, we're trying to persuade the customer that it's interesting for him, first of all, not only for us. And that's why sometimes customers skip this phase. But if anyhow he accepted this phase, we clarify current and expected project vision and try to, as I mentioned before, collect as much requirements as possible. The more requirements we collect here, the easier it will be for us to conduct the subsequent phases. The main goal, there are different approaches to what we are doing on discovery phase and what is the main goal of it, but I am strongly convinced that the main thing is to understand the customer's current state, we call it as this, define the desired state of how it should be in future, and create an action plan for to conduct a gap analysis, just to know how to overcome this gap and to find ourselves in this to-be state. The main idea is that your client can come to you with different requests as to improve his current existing system, and the same with the request for creating a new system from scratch. Anyhow, the approach should be the same. We analyze how it is done right now and how it should be done in future. What do we do officially? Let's speak honestly. We divide our work into two parts at least. Officially, we clarify the scope of the project. We define major criteria of the success. We negotiate the priorities to know what we should done in the first role. And maybe we discover risks and somehow manage them. But there is also another part. Covertly, we demonstrate our experience in the domain, or it's not so good for us, but if we have no experience, we can investigate the domain while the discovery phase. We give a client an opportunity to test and to get used of our working approach, of how we conduct it, what are the frequency of communication with the customer, what is our agile vision, and so on. And we show empathy to the business problems of the client. We try to persuade the client that we are as much interested in his project as he is. We are working for him and we protect his interests, first of all. When do we need the discovery? There's a lot of text in this slide, but the main idea is that we try to conduct discovery anytime we are not fully sure about the scope of the product, about the markets, about the audience, about the competitors, and so on. If we have no clear vision of these main issues, we are trying to persuade our customer that discovery is the best answer to him. Why it is so and what facts do we use? The value for client is giving a precise project estimation, mapping his business need with the interest of the end users, defining and implementing the risk management strategies, because sometimes our client doesn't know exactly what problems he can meet during the product implementation, and so on. And we try to, the client will understand the detailed scope of the project and implementation roadmap. Sometimes it seems to the clients that it's only a matter of 2 or 3 months to develop the product from scratch, and according to our deliverables, according to all beautifully drawn diagrams, user story mappings, and so on, he will understand the whole scope of our project, and maybe that's how it would be easier for us to move those deadlines, because it will be clearly visible that it's not achievable in 2 or 3 months, as it was told before. So for us, for the company, we reduce the number of projects with incorrect estimation. We reduce the number of unexpected risks because we also don't know sometimes partly the risks we are dealing with. We can form the development team during this phase because sometimes a few new facts appeared and we have to deal with them, maybe to find some particular professionals on the market and try to get them into our team. And we are adding a happy client to our portfolio because sometimes, for example, as in healthcare domain, we are frequently asked for good references from our previous clients. And if after the project you will receive your money and not a happy client, you will have problems with that. So we're going to our next question about the business analyst role in the discovery phase. So we organize, as a business analyst, we organize interviews with the stakeholders, we elicitate the requirements, we understand the workflow, and so on and so forth. I can assume everything that, I can assume that business analyst is like a link between the technical team and the customer, and that's how we can make them better understand each other, because business is always for money, business is also for his interest, and technical guys are always about some particular technical issues, and sometimes it's very hard for them to understand why should we perform particular this solution when there are lots of existing and good solutions in the market we can use. So business analyst does not work alone on the discovery phase. We usually involve a really big team if it's possible. So the main participants are the project manager or project coordinator, business analyst, software architect or tech lead, a technical guy who always helps us to understand how it will be implemented. Optionally, but it's very good if we have a UI UX designer, if we have a developer, especially mobile developers for mobile applications if we are working with them, and quality assurance, particularly in the cases when we are going through different complex certifications, especially in the US healthcare market. From the client side, of course we need a client. It's good if we have a marketer, but it's also optionally, and a subject matter expert. I should also notice that subject matter expert can also be presented from our side if we have, for example, an experienced doctors in our staff, but usually they also can be provided by the customer. Having such a vast number of people at the project, we should understand that there should be a good communication among them. First of all, with the BA as the only source of incoming the data from the client. When BA is communicating with the UI UX designer, we prepare user research or personas, and we can compose high-level wireframes just to understand how should the project look like. What else? If we are talking about business analyst and architect, we in close communication prepare architect a visual document. Okay, not we, but architect mostly, but we trying to communicate at least with the non-functional requirements with him. We can also prepare software architect document together and providing him a non-functional requirements from our side. If we are talking about the whole team in general, BA plus UI UX plus architect plus QA plus devs, we are preparing a good comprehensive vision and scope document, software requirement specification, maybe full decomposition of the features from a feature list. We can prepare design concept, test plan, and finally we can make a precise estimation of the project. That's, I guess, the most valuable one. Among other possible artifacts, we can outline vision and scope document, business requirements document, software requirement specification, context or process diagrams, business model canvas, initial backlog with user stories or use cases, and user story mapping. Here are the examples of these documents. For example, vision and scope that we are preparing in our company. Maybe a few words about every artifact. In vision scope, we define what should be done and what shouldn't be done in this product. We can define our initial MVP scope and the scope for subsequent releases. And we can define limitations, as I mentioned before, what should not be done in any way, even if the client has changed his mind. We'll have to re-estimate this scope of work. We can also concentrate on the business context about the profiles, about our stakeholders, to know how to communicate with them, what useful and necessary information we can find within a particular person, and so on. Business requirement documents, sometimes it is presented like an analog to the vision scope document. Here we'll also touch upon the context, touch upon the requirements, and it is also named here like in scope and out of scope. We define functional, non-functional requirements, but here we dive deeply in the data requirements and interface requirements. Software requirement specification, I hope that practically all of you has dealt with this document. We can introduce the general approach for the project. We can have a high-level description, and the most valuable thing, the most valuable section is about the system features. We describe precisely what should the feature look like and so on. One small note: if we prepare software requirement specification during our discovery phase, if a simple discovery phase can last for I don't know, 4 or 6 weeks, preparing software requirement specification document will require up to 2 months, and it will be a high-level document that can be changed significantly during the project implementation. So we also work with the interface requirements and non-functional requirements in this document. Context diagram, that's the artifact where we can try to draw our understanding of the system. We can divide it into several modules. We can also decide what modules should be developed in the first row, what should be added maybe a little bit later, and so on. We display here what are the main actors, other systems that deal with our product, and the role and the data we exchange with the systems. BPMN diagram, my favorite artifact. We are trying to describe the process. We're trying to describe the process, and usually we compare the as-is state diagram with the to-be state diagram. Of course, it is very time-consuming, but it's one of the artifacts that is highly appreciated from the client side, because here it has many funny pictures. Not all is clear here, but it looks like you've really done your job during the month. Business model canvas, we usually do it when we're dealing with a unique or brand new business. We don't know how it works really, and we try to understand the key partners, key activities, key resources, cost structure, revenue streams, and so on. Composing this kind of artifact will give us a clear understanding how the client's business works and what should be added or improved here, what may be added or improved here. Initial backlog, that's also a very tough artifact from the BA side, because we are trying to understand the scope of work for the product that is going to be developed without even starting doing it. The problem is that it also may change during the implementation phase significantly, maybe completely, but it gives us, as I've mentioned before, the idea of how many features should be implemented and why it should take more than 2 or 3 months that were asked at the very beginning of the project. And user story mapping. It's also highly appreciated from the client side because, yes, as I mentioned, it's more clear than business process diagram. And here we can list the main user stories, the main maybe epics, divide them between or among all the roles that are in our system, and even determine what should be released in the MVP phase or in our second or third even releases. So maybe let's touch upon our project cases. The first one was about, let's not name them due to our NDA, but the first was about creating a comprehensive EHR for primary care hospitals. I mean electronic health records system. The customer request was we should create a system for performing healthcare service in primary care hospitals. That means that we only perform the services with the urgent clients. We do not dive deep into lab tests, into some, I don't know, investigations like cardiology and so on. We just estimate assess the state of the patient and deliver the necessary help. After that, he was sent to the hospital. So after a month of discovery phase, we've created a vision and scope document. We've prioritized user stories. We composed a prioritized user story mapping with main features and composed a set of mandatory features and test cases for passing the regulator certification because it was for the US market and we have to pass CERT 2015 certification. It was these test cases were mainly for applying to the regulatory body. So after that, we've launched the project. We've even launched the MVP product, and after that, the product was completed, I guess, on a high enough level. So case 2, it was a COVID diagnosis application. The main request was about creating an app for testing COVID, and the idea was, the idea was about receiving the confirmation from the Ministry of Health that this person really is sick or has no COVID, and this certificate gave him an opportunity to visit all these public, I don't know. Sorry, public, sorry. So, after the discovery phase, we prioritized system modules and defined the MVP scope because from the very beginning it was too overwhelming for us because there was an AI module, there was sending the results for the whole family and so on. We've prioritized these requirements and concentrate on the MVP scope that delivered some value for our customer. We've created a vision and scope document, we've composed an initial product backlog and the final design of the product. After the discovery phase, the product was successfully launched. We've implemented it for several releases, and I guess that due to the fact that another wave of COVID is arising in Europe, it will be still developed and new features will be added. So, case 3 was about app for a medical device. The customer requested to redesign and adding new features to blood pressure measurements device application. After discovery phase, we've prioritized system modules. We've negotiated the MVP scope. We've created a comprehensive benchmarking among all the products that are currently on the market. And we've formed a relevant approach to system design because in the initial product, the design was really poor and not so user-friendly. About the tips for discovery phase, I should fully support my colleague and previous speaker about the tips he has mentioned for the pre-sales phase. The same is with discovery, but adding something new. Not all discoveries result in development contracts. Unfortunately, even though you've put all your skills and all your ideas in this discovery phase, your client may take all the deliverables and artifacts from you and go to another vendor. It will be even easier for this vendor to estimate the product. So don't think that it's your problem. The scope may change significantly. As I've mentioned before, you can work with the artifacts from the pre-sale phase. Maybe it was another business analyst who composed them. And during these negotiations and discovery phase, you'll find out that the value for the client was estimated incorrectly. And that's how you will change the scope. You will maybe add something new, and maybe you will even concentrate on some other modules that were not in priority after the pre-sales phase. Another problem, I guess, is that communication with the customer and the team may take up to 70% of your time. It's not about sitting and writing your documents alone. It's about continuous communication with your teammates. As I've mentioned on the previous slide, it's about working with the designer, working with the software architect, and so on. And the last but not the least, that all the docs are to be updated daily. The biggest problem from my side, the idea is that while you're speaking to the customer, you think that everything is clear, everything you'll remember everything, you'll put some notes, and after that you'll switch to another issue, another problem. But in a day or in 2 days after receiving a huge amount of new requirements, new requests, and so on, you'll forget a part of these requirements, you'll miss something, and it may result to incorrect estimation and problems after launching the implementation phase. So that's all, and here's my address. If you have some more tips, please share with me. I'll implement it in my daily work, and yeah, give a link to your to your account. Thank you.
Thank you, Vitaly. Does anyone have questions? Here. Oh, maybe here first.
Thank you. So in the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that involving a business analyst in the discovery phase can help mitigate risks from the very beginning. And while it's clear that it can mitigate internal risks, like, do you think that it can have a significant impact on mitigating external risks as well? I'm talking about regulatory or market risks, act of God, and so on and so on.
Of course, yeah, thank you for your question. Of course, we can't impact on the regulatory body somehow. We just can reduce the risk. For example, from our experience, if we've dealt with this regulatory body before, we can understand what possible problems are, how can we mitigate this risk. Maybe we can transfer them to another company, like if you are going to receive some certificate you have not worked with before, you can hire any company that is specialized in receiving such a certificate, and in that way you will transfer this risk to another party. Maybe you will warn your client that, okay, for example, we have this ICO 13485 requirements. They were composed in 2016. They were updated in 2021, but there is still a growing possibility that they will be changed significantly in some near future, and you may just warn and put this risk into your estimation that in case, it's like an assumption, in case this regulatory body will change the requirements, we'll have to rework our product, and that will require additional time and additional costs from your side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And there is another question. Let's be here.
I just want to ask how these artifacts you present from discovery phase are aligned with the agile methodology, because I think it wasn't mentioned, or how you align this, let's say, discovery phase into agile methodology.
Okay, thank you for your question. The idea is that even during this discovery phase, we may during this discovery phase, we can negotiate our approach with the client. We can say that, okay, please, we are working on agile methodology. We'll prepare these artifacts in 2 or 6 weeks. After that, we'll, for example, work on Scrum Ban, and so on. That's the idea of the methodology, and it will be a part of, how to call it, separate negotiations from your management side. As I mentioned, project manager he also participates in this discovery phase, and he can settle all these questions that, okay, we're working on Agile, we're working on the waterfall methodology, and so on. And after that, yeah, we have, for example, initial backlog. We split it into sprints. We try to decompose these features into some small user stories that can be put into the sprint, and we work, business analysts describe the features, the user stories, developers implement them, and testers also test the previous ones and ask you for your clarification if something is not clear. Is it the answer? Thank you.
This is the second question.
The third one. I have a question regarding the customer experience in a broad way. So healthcare is a heavily regulated sphere. So the first sub-question is how do you test your solutions with the final users, whether it's medical personnel or some customers of the clinics, yeah? And how often customers come back to you to release the new version of your product, or once released, some clinic in the US stuck with the very first version of the product and they live with that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Maybe I'll ask you to repeat the second part, because from the first, no, not right now, after answering the first part. So the idea is, yes, healthcare is highly regulated sphere, highly regulated domain, and we always try to find all the possible and all the available documents of how we can, for example, reduce the risk of not passing this or that certification. First of all, for example, if we're talking about this CERT or CERT 2015 certification, all test cases that we should fulfill after launching the product, they are placed on the correspondent website, and they're available for your team. Another question is for user testing, user acceptance testing. It's very interesting and useful if you have an access to these end users, but usually you don't, because you can't launch this uncertified product on the market. So there's another case that is that happens frequently in this domain, that your customers are somehow dealt with the healthcare in their past. For example, they were doctors, they now managers of some clinics, and they would like to ask and request some product from your company. They know customers' expectation and their needs. Maybe in that way we can replace this real user testing. And the second part of the question was?
The second part was basically from your answer. Since you can't test the users, how often, from your experience, customers come back to release the second, the third, the fourth version of the product because they see that customer experience is not well enough?
Okay. First of all, if we are talking about agile methodologies during our work, we try to deliver our product in a way that when we are finishing, for example, release 2, release 1 is somehow well or badly tested by the some not real users, but maybe in some testing environment. There were even cases when the product was prepared for the European market, but it was launched in advance in some less regulated markets. That's how we can also receive this feedback from the customers. I guess that's all.
Thank you. And this is another question.
Hi, so my question was about the slide. So you've mentioned that during the discovery phase, you allow your customers to test the processes that you do have in Andersen. For example, it was the agile process and so on. So how do you do that, and do you really do that?
You know, it's very hard to, thank you for the question. It's very hard to implement all the, and to prove all the advantages of the agile methodology during the discovery phase. We are mostly show the customer the presentation, we show the references from our previous clients, and we try to, try to model this process, maybe in some small parts. Like, for example, today we are discussing a new feature. In a few days, during our next discussion, our UI UX designer prepares some wireframes according to the things we've discussed on the previous meeting. After that, we are writing the requirements. The requirements are approved or not approved by the customer. We receive all the notes and suggestions. And after that, we promise that they will be implemented exactly in the way that we've described them, and the customer expects it for us. After that, we may prepare some kind of dynamic prototype just to show that, okay, it will be working like that. You click here, you receive this pop-up window, and if you confirm your action, we are redirected somewhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. There's another question.
So my question is, let's say you have like a global company, right?
Yeah.
And they try to bring a product to you that you want to develop in different regions. So how do you deal with like different requirements? For example, European requirements, the American requirement, the Latin America requirements. How do you deal with that?
Thank you for your question. We are trying to organize the preparation of our, for example, business analyst in a specially designed pool for example, healthcare. Some of us, they are specialized in, for example, US markets requirements. Some are prepared for example, DACH region, and work with the local regulators like DIGA, for example, in Germany. And according to this experience, personal experience, they try to conduct this discovery or implementation phase. If it is possible, if we could not handle the project with our own skills, we are looking for some vendors who will take part in our implementation phase, maybe who will be responsible for this certification or testing or applying the product in the new markets. That's how it is done.
Thank you. There's more questions here.
Thanks for your presentation, Tali. I have a short question. What is MVP in a second case, but third case possible too? It is a project pattern for devs, model view project?
It's the minimum viable product. Thank you for your question. Minimum viable product. How the user or the client can achieve his goals, can present some service for the end users, and for maybe even receive some money for that. And that's how the product will be implemented in a very, very short scope. But we have, according to successful experience of communicating with us and receiving a working product, the customer will be eager to continue working with us and to add more features in subsequent releases, release 2, release 3, and so on.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Vitaly, for your presentation.
Thank all of you.
Let's take 1 minute break, and we'll back to you with our special guest. Thank you. And now our special guest. Please welcome Ilona Kedracka.
Yeah, I think, okay. Can you guys hear me now? I presume you can. Okay, all right. Hi, good to be back to the meetup scene. Good to be back to meetings offline after almost 2-year break, I guess. Really happy to be with you here. My name is Ilona Kedracka, and I'm going to be talking to you today about, honestly, one of the topics that excites me the most when it comes to product management and discovery, which is gathering the customer feedback and how to do it, how to do it effectively. And I would just like to give you some tips on what I learned the hard way sometimes. So let's get going. Yeah, I'm the only person that of today's speakers that actually is not the employee of Andersen. So I thought I'm going to give you a bit of background on who I am, basically. So I have about 6 years of experience in IT. I did various roles. One of these roles was actually a business analyst role. I was a PMO, I was a tester, I was a data analyst, but throughout all these roles, I had this idea of becoming a product manager one day. That's not the idea I had happening. Anyway. And that's what I do. For the past 2 years, I've been a product manager in a company called WP Engine. The company is actually a world leader in managed WordPress, and I'm in particular involved in a product called Atlas, which is the solution for headless WordPress. And a bit of cliche, but I really love learning. And stuff that I learned right now is mostly about continuous discovery, and this is actually going to be a huge chunk of what I'm going to talk about today. I really enjoy learning about facilitation techniques, how to engage development team in discovery and in research. You can find me on my blog where I actually write about learning for adults, and also on Polywork when I describe my product management process and stuff that I learn, stuff that I fail in and succeed sometimes. When it comes to today's talk, I separated it into 4 different chapters. I'm going to start with, I guess, very important question of why bother gathering customer feedback at all, and why I'm really convinced that it should be product managers and people that work with requirements to be champions in that matter. Then we're going to move to processes, and this is actually going to be the main part of my talk today, where I'm going to give you some tips, some stuff that I learned on how to actually gather customer feedback effectively and efficiently. Then I'm going to tell you a bit more about the actual conversation techniques, but more in a manner of just like planting some seed in your head, so you know that some techniques exist and you can actually learn more about them, maybe after the talk. And then, just like everyone actually today, I'm gonna finish with tips and tricks of like rather small things that we learned, but I found really important to remember about them as well. A bit of a disclaimer before we go forward. The company that I work in is probably very different from the company that Andersen is. We are a product company, which means that our product is basically continuous. We do not have like a start-finish date of projects. We do not take inquiries of building something for other companies. We do build a product that that other companies actually use, and our users are actually companies that build this kind of products for their clients. So there is like a secondary relationship of clients of such sort to us. So all the stuff that I'm going to talk about is very much embedded in this like product company. And might happen that some of it may be applicable to you, or some of it maybe not. And that's actually a second disclaimer. What I find really hard, I guess the hardest part of product management to me was the fact that there is no right answer. There is like no single rule that you have to learn and it's gonna always work. There is a lot of ambiguity, and all you can do is only test various approaches, see what works, see what doesn't, and get really comfortable with the fact that you can only experiment and you can only select like better or worse solutions. But even the stuff that I tell you today, a lot of this may not be applicable to your particular situation. So just take it with a grain of salt and just remember always about the domain that you work in, the type of company that you work in, the situation, the market you're in, etc. So yeah. So to start with the first question of why bother? Is it really that important to have a hands-on experience in talking to customers as a product manager or business analyst, basically anyone that works with requirements that actually impacts the shape of the product that is going to be the final result of certain activities? And I do really think that it is very important, and I'm going to tell you why. I guess for people that have anything to do with product management, they have seen at least a variation of this diagram, which basically constitutes the areas of expertise for a product manager. And the common idea is that this person has to have some experience in UX, some experience in business, some experience in technology, and some experience with customers. The idea is that they don't usually have to be masters in like all of them. They have to have extensive knowledge, but they usually have some people that they can rely on, that they can get support from, they can consult with. They just have to have like a general level of familiarity with such aspects. But I think that of all of these 4 components of what makes a product manager, I'm of an opinion that of this particular aspect, they should actually be the masters. They should actually be very well versed. They should understand their customers, be experts on who the customers are, how they work, what they do, what they feel, etc. And you cannot. I would say that you can probably outsource to some degree a lot of these other components of the product manager work. But I will argue that this particular one should not be outsourced if you only have this opportunity, because that's not going to be the case for all the companies, but for some, especially product companies, that might be the case that you will actually be able to talk with your customers personally. And a lot of product managers that I met, they are members of some kind of product churches, you can think about this way. They have their favorite way of working. They have their favorite product influencer, or whatever you call it, that they like to follow, they like to actually learn from. And this kind of person for me is Teresa Torres, who is the author of the Product Talk blog, and she's also the author of the Continuous Discovery Habits book. And she actually wrote something in one of her posts that I really resonated with, and it's a bit of a lengthy quote, but I want to read it to you anyway because I find it really cool. Product research needs to be timely, actionable, and believable for a product team to act upon it. To achieve all three, the product trio, so the product manager, a designer, and an engineer, needs to conduct their own interviews. Many teams don't want to hear this. It's easy to outsource interviewing to other parts of the organization, to the user research team, to the marketing team, or to the business intelligence team. Product teams are marching toward a desired outcome. Many teams release code every week, if not every day. We have daily questions that need fast answers. At most companies, centralized research teams work on different cadence. They conduct project-based research. They spend 4 to 6 weeks getting a reliable answer to a meaty business question. They are serving multiple teams, weighing the demands of different teams against each other. A product team can't afford to sit around waiting for an answer. They need to make decisions based on whatever data they have now. When a product trio conducts their own interviews, they are able to get fast answers and infuse more of their decisions with valuable customer feedback. So when you think about customer feedback, I would argue that this is a different kind of knowledge than, for example, knowledge on technology or UX, because you can learn technology by, like through courses, through books, through experience, etc. The same you can do with UX. Maybe less with business, but knowledge on customers is based on stories. And if you think about it, the more people are there on the way that tell the story, the more the story actually changes. Like you can get it with gossips, like when gossip goes from one person to another, or when you play the Chinese whispers, you can see that this message is there is information being lost at each step of the way. So if you actually get the access to talk to customers firsthand, you're reducing this waste, and you actually get the unchanged story, and you can dig into it and see what's behind that. The other thing that I find very important is what was mentioned here as well, that it's process of working in a product company is very rapid, and you need answers fast, so that you actually won't wait for data to make an informed decision for a long time. And this is unfortunately how it works when you only rely on the project-based research. And the third idea of why I really think this is important is that when you actually involve the product team and they get engaged with the customers and they see what the customers are doing and how they're interacting with the stuff that you build, magic happens, and they get really excited, they get really involved, and they just come up with a whole list of different ideas on how they can actually solve something. So this element of excitement is actually one of the things that I saw happening, and that really got me into investing in the research more as a PM. So I want to share with you some of the processes that we did, and again, we did it in my company, which is of certain nature, of certain domain, a certain moment in time. So not all of them may be applicable to you, but I also think that just fixating on this idea of getting to talk to customers in any way possible is probably not the best solution either. It sometimes happens that as a PM you just get enlightened and okay, I need to start talking to my customers, and you just go right in and email them or just try to get this contact as quickly as you can. And this is not necessarily the best solution in many situations because your conditions intercompany may actually be very different. So something that I would recommend maybe as a first step if you're very much detached from the customer feedback now is to identify people that I would call customer proxies. I guess whichever company that you work in, there are teams, there are people that talk to your customers because they have to for many different reasons. And to actually start it in a kind of safe way, you can start with just knowing who those people are, kind of mapping them, identifying them, connecting with them, and just starting a relationship with them. So the chances are that they already have a lot of customer feedback that you didn't get a chance to hear about yet. So they can already provide you with some cool problems to be solved, with some issues that your customers are facing. So even by just establishing this relationship, you can actually earn a lot. And examples of these people really vary from company to company. In my company, for example, these kind of people are account managers. So we, as a company, for example, our customers are agencies that build sites for their customers. And usually this type of agencies, they have some sort of account manager, someone that just kind of takes care of them, makes sure that they are okay with the product, make sure that they are still using it, or they get to hear about various issues with the product. So they are actually very, very helpful. Salespeople are another types of proxies that you can actually use because they have a lot of useful information, not only on your actual customers, but maybe more importantly on people that are not your customers. Because they may have information on, okay, your product was not sold, why? And this is the type of information that you actually want to have for sure. Something that I found really important in my case, was to have a great relationship with the customer support team, because they are the ones that are first line with your customers, trying to solve their problems, really knowing what's happening, knowing what's the most common issue that the users are facing, etc. So to actually establish the relationship with, for example, for me, the customer support manager, and just having our ways of communication was really game-changing for me. So you can think about it, like I presume in your companies it can be a whole lot of, like different types of people, but basically the idea is to identify the people that do talk with your customers already and leverage these relationships. And oftentimes they do already have the calls, for example, with the customers, which you can join. Obviously you have to build the relationship first so they know what you need it for, and they are sure that you won't jeopardize their priorities and their efforts and their needs. But once you have the relationship, you can actually already join the conversations that are happening with customers, and it's very helpful even if you are just a fly on the wall. If you just listen what's happening, if you listen what they are talking about, if you listen about some problems that they are facing, etc. Even without doing any research per se, you can actually learn a whole lot more than, for example, someone passing you the information that, oh, customer X mentioned that they need this feature. Because sometimes, it's not always like, I think that sometimes they just need the feature. Sometimes it's maybe not a great idea to just over-philosophize it, but oftentimes there is another need behind this. So if you actually if you get contact to these customers and you get a chance to hear from them firsthand, you may actually get a very different feedback from what someone else heard that is not that connected to the product. This is, I would say, probably specific. Like this is one of the most specific things from company to company, because not all the companies have a UX research team. But if you do, then I would argue that your job as a PM is to have really, really great relationship with your UX research team. They are champions in customer feedback. They really know how to conduct these interviews. They really know how to make it work to get information from your customers, and they are just a great partner in the product discovery. But as it was mentioned before, for me it's not enough to rely on their research only. And it's not to say that it has to be replaced, by no means. It's very important and it has to continue. But there is actually something that we did in my team, an approach that I proposed that we started working with, which is this kind of 2 paths to discovery. The project-based discovery stays as it was. So, and this is something that we call the structured research. So to generate new ideas, to form opportunities, to test certain concepts, maybe to do research that is involves multiple different teams and product lines, this is still the responsibility of the UX research team. And then you, as a PM, you are informed about the results from this research. But I would say that reading the notes is probably not enough. If you can at least watch the recordings, better if you can join these calls and actually hear it and just listen to what they are saying. But this is something that you should be up to date if you actually have this team doing this always. And another path that we follow that is kind of parallel to it is the continuous research. So to ensure that product teams actually get the chance to talk to customers, to talk to customers frequently, to address some of the weird behavior that we are seeing in the data, to test something really quickly when we need fast answers. To like, okay, we have 5 different ways on how can we solve this problem. Maybe we can get, I don't know, 3 people on the call and just test some ideas with them. This is actually something that the PM is responsible for. At least we agreed that it's going to be the way. And then I have more flexibility and more freedom in the processes that I can actually follow. So when we started following this pattern, there was actually a very simple goal that we established for ourselves, which was to talk to at least 1 customer a week, which sounds simple, but it proved to be not as easy as we thought it's going to be. But we actually made it for a bunch of consecutive weeks. And this was because we found some ways on how to do it smart. So I wanted to share some of these ideas with you. And one of the things that we did is customer days, but we kind of changed it from what it used to be in the past. So we do actually organize customer days where we invite people to join the feedback call. But instead of doing it kind of one size fits all and just inviting everyone once a quarter, we decided that we're going to split the customers into segments because we have, SMB customers, enterprise customers, agencies, the users of our freemium product. So we can actually reach out to them more frequently. Like every month, we can reach to 1 cohort, and this way we're going to get more frequent interviews, more frequent calls with more people than just reaching out to all of them at once and just having this once a quarter. The other thing that we did is that you as a PM, as long as you are aware of, like you have your own data, you are following certain metrics, certain behaviors, you can actually specify processes on, okay, for example, if you want to increase the engagement in your product, you can decide that in case you spot a user that, for example, joined your product and hasn't done anything for a week, then you may put some rule in place that, okay, if it happens, then just target these people automatically. So you may actually automate the process of reaching out to such people if you identify kind of paths of what behaviors you want to explore, and just make sure that you don't even almost have to govern it because you can automate it in a way that it's going to happen kind of for you. You can set something that I call feedback traps. So you can take a look at the customer journey on your product and say, okay, for example, in this part, I can see that people drop out frequently. So maybe I can put something in place like a pop-up or like a link or something that is going to say, hey, like we see that you are about to drop out. Here's, like maybe you can tell us why and just show them some questionnaire or like show them a link to sign up for a session. So you can actually see what are these problematic aspects of your product and then make sure that there is a way for the user to actually provide you feedback. And something that you can negotiate with your UX research team is also the ad hoc research. So to give you an example, with my research team, we have an agreement that if I spot something weird in a data, like some weird behavior that I really did not anticipate, as long as it's, for example, less than 10 people, they are good with me just reaching out to them, just sending them an email saying, hey, I'm Ilona, I'm a product manager. I saw that you did X, and I'm really curious why. Can we talk? So that's actually proved to be very successful because if you personalize this message more, people really feel that, okay, like you really care about them and you really want to talk to them and clarify it. Something kind of aside from it is a concept of a product council that we also established. So in case you actually focus on a very particular type of customer, you can maybe create some reference group, like a group of reference customers that you can make some agreements with. So if you can only find people that are actually really excited about your product, you may get some agreement with them saying, okay, we're gonna meet, for example, once a quarter or like once a month. And we're gonna inform you about what we are doing, and there is a high chance that what you tell us is going to be fueling our roadmap. But we are going to have some more frequent sessions with, for example, the people that use our product to provide us some feedback, to help us make decisions, to be more available than maybe a regular customer would be. It works best if you actually have maybe like if there is a business decision, like given quarter, for example, that you focus on a certain type of customer, and then you can actually establish something like this as well. I have some tips on how to actually conduct the conversation. Maybe it's going to be less detailed because this topic could be a topic of at least one separate session. But just to give you some ideas on maybe what to read about, to know that certain techniques exist, and you can actually get more familiar with it if you're interested in something like this. So if you're actually going to get involved in customer research, you need to learn how to do it. It is a skill. It's really not just as easy as just going to a call and talking to the customers, because you can fall into traps yourself. You can fall into the confirmation bias trap, where you're going to ask them questions that just kind of confirm what you think is right already, and they're possibly going to confirm, kind of led by you, of what they are supposed to tell. So there is actually, so knowing how to what questions to ask and how to ask them is a real skill, and there are like books and courses that you can take on it. And if you have a research team, they can teach you that, or they can point you to some cool sources where you can learn it from. But don't underestimate it. It is a skill. Listening is also a skill. Taking notes is also a skill. There are many ways on how to do it efficiently, and it's something that that's probably not possible to learn without any practice, but you can definitely do something to get prepared in a better way before you actually jump right in. If you actually have access to data, which probably you do if you are a business analyst or product manager, knowing that you're going to talk to this particular customer, you can learn more about them prior to the call. So you can take a look at their activity in the database, you can take a look at their activity in the product, you can maybe trace them, see what they did, so that when you actually get on a call with them, you can ask them more precise questions and you can really dig deeper into the particular behavior that they express. Something that I'm really a real fan of is to actually involving the product team as much as I can. Like, if I can get them on every call, I'll get them on every call. But sometimes it's not that easy because, at least in our case, maybe because my company is an American company, which means that these calls are late sometimes. But if I only can get at least some of the members of the product team, I'll definitely prefer to do it. And something that I realize is that for them, it's a really magical experience. Because I think for a developer, there is nothing more enlightening than seeing a user actually using your product. And they're like, oh, I had no idea. I know that they will like, do this and that with this. And it often happens that actually after the call, they will be very motivated to fix this or that thing. Sometimes I don't even have to plan it. They're just like, no, I really need to fix it because she's going to bug me. So you don't have to, and you actually shouldn't get your entire team on a call, like 5 or 6 people listening to a single person is just going to make this person feel intimidated. So maybe don't do that, but you can get like a product savvy developer and UX designer and just tell them to be a fly on the wall on the call and take some notes. And you can also teach them how to take good notes. And something that I also find very important and something that is actually going to ensure that you use the data that you get from these calls is some sort of knowledge repository. So again, you can do it in many different ways. You can summarize the calls. You can maybe prepare some more visual conclusions of the call. But there is one technique that I really find amazing that is called opportunity solution tree, which is basically, this is a living entity that you keep adding to after each and every call. And it helps you to track the the history of the problems that user expressed. It helps you to kind of group these ideas, group these problems into clusters. And it's really, really cool when it comes to prioritization for the upcoming quarters to help you decide which problem you're actually going to focus on. So I don't want to go to into much detail with that, but this is a really cool concept that I would really recommend people to check out. And to summarize with some tips, something that we learned, sometimes small but very significant lessons that we learned the hard way. Something that I found very surprising is that I was really excited to start talking to people, and they were not equally excited to start talking to me for some reason. And I was just like, why do you do that? I want to make your life better. Don't you want to talk with me? Don't you want this product to be better, etc.? But obviously they are the level of emotional investment is obviously incomparable. And you actually have to make sure that you provide some value for them to join the call. And the easiest way is just to incentivize, saying hey, we're going to send you a $50 voucher if you actually join the call. That's also very important to make the processes as easy as possible and to know that the number of people that actually sign up for calls is going to be quite low anyway, probably no matter what you do. So if you can maybe rely more on very simple polls and only have an option to join the call, you're still going to get more data than just pushing people to join the call because it's not going to be that easy as I thought it's going to be. Something else that you can do is to share plans about your product and get people excited, saying, okay, we plan to work on a certain type of thing. So if you're interested, if that's something that's going to solve your problem, then you can join us for a couple of calls and we can make sure that this feature that we plan to release is actually going to solve your problem. So again, it depends on the type of customer that you work with. Sometimes it's not possible to do that because of NDAs and stuff, but sometimes you have trusted customers that you can actually do such things with them. Show them the result of the fact that you learned something from them actually made a difference. So recently I had a situation where we actually delivered a feature that solved the problem of one of the customers that we talked with, and I just shoot him a message about it, hey, remember we talked about this thing? This thing is actually on production. You can start using it right now. And he was so excited. He was all in that's great. And the account team was also really happy about that because that just really boosts the engagement and the satisfaction of the customer from the product. And you can also actually help them during the call once you spot something that they are struggling with. You can actually, during the call, provide them a way to mitigate it, maybe a way to kind of bypass something that they are struggling with, just to make sure that they can continue to use your product. Something that I found very surprising also is how much language matters and how much the language can actually mess with you. So you have to be really careful on the messaging that you send to the users once you try to encourage them to provide feedback to you. A true story that happened to us is that we used to send our users a message that went like this. If you're interested in a paid interview with our team, sign up here. And we got almost 0 signups. And we had no idea why, because we are reaching the right people. I thought so at least. We are making it really easy. We are incentivizing them, we're gonna give them the voucher after that. But once one of the guys actually signed up and we talked to them, he enlightened us that he thought that he has to pay for the interview that we are going to have with him. And that was super surprising to us. We had no idea, we didn't think about it. So we changed the messaging and we made it more clear that you are going to be the one that's actually going to get paid. And we saw a huge increase in signups. So sometimes it's really small things that can really mess your processes, so just be careful on the messaging that you use. And something that you have to be aware of is that this is a continuous process and the process never really stops. So for me and my team, what we did is just experiment, come up with some idea, do it, test it, see if it worked, come back to it, refine it, etc., etc. So usually some kind of process stabilizes after some time, but still there are some tweaks here and there that you make as long as you learn something new from the customers. So just embrace this continuous mindset and know that it's probably never going to be a finished process because lots of things may change. And to wrap up, I talked a bit about magic that happens, and there is a quote from Marty Kagan, who is the leader of the Silicon Valley Product Group, another team that I really adore and I learn a lot from. And he said, if I had to pick one thing I love the most about the feeling of working in a truly empowered product team, it is the form of magic that happens when you have people that are motivated and skilled in their respective discipline, product design and engineering. And they sit around a prototype and or watch a user interact with our prototype. And the engineer points out new possibilities, and the designer points out different potential experiences, and the product manager weighs in with the sales or financial or privacy-related implications. And after exploring a bunch of approaches, they find one that actually works. It's valuable, it's usable, it's feasible, and viable. And I saw this magic happen, and this is what actually really solidified me that the product manager is a really cool career that I still want to pursue. And yeah, we can just finish with that. Thank you so much. If you want to reach out to me, here are some ways on how to do it. And yeah, happy to take any questions.
Yeah, do you have any questions to Ilona?
There is one very excited one, apparently.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your sharing your experience. While it's obvious how to support your product while dealing with the current feedback, yeah, it helps you to maintain your product on the current stage. What is your flow to innovate your product, to release some features that are not presented on the market yet, but you want to be one step ahead?
Yeah. So what actually happens during the calls, it's you don't only get feedback on you already plan to do, but you also realize that there is some opportunity that you can address. So at least the experience that I got is that usually even when I go to a call with a customer, and even if I want to test a particular thing, I usually come back with like 3 new ideas or like things that they struggle with. So I would say that this approach is also helpful not only to validate some ideas that you already have, but also to give you ideas on some things that you can innovate for and some other problems that you can solve for the customer. So it's usually also generative, and yeah, you can also learn a lot about the things that you can actually do in the future.
Thank you for this question. Do you have any more questions?
There is one behind you, I think.
Here.
First, thank you so much for your experience. That was really nice to hear. I have one question regarding your example. You said it's nice to involve product team into the calls with customers as it increases the motivation. I was wondering from the PM side, as you've said you worked as a PM, does that work in a long term to increase the motivation for product team to work on their product? Thank you.
I would say not for everyone. And I gave up on the idea of I'm going to turn every engineer I work with to a product savvy engineer, and that's fine. That's usually something that's not actually something that it's absolutely necessary. But I found it working, but it shouldn't be the only thing that you do as a PM to get them excited, because this is just the beginning of getting them really involved in the product development. The process that we did actually going forward after we learned about something is that I try to do a lot of, I try to conduct meetings with them when they actually ideate. So usually, maybe to describe the process in short, what we do usually is that we learn about the problem on the call, and then we meet, let's say, in like a group of me, 1 or 2 engineers and a designer, and we go through the problem again. Like, okay, guys, like we heard this, and he did that, this happened, and he can't do this because of that. What can we do about it? And we usually brainstorm, but in a slightly different way, so that everyone comes up with ideas separately, and then we kind of, cluster it, compare it, see what other people came up with, and then we kind of, sometimes we repeat this process, because sometimes you get like a shower thought of like, oh, that would be cool, to do something in the time where you didn't really dedicate for ideation. And once we actually finish this, then we do story mapping on the solution that we selected. So it definitely helps, but if you stop on this, it's probably not going to be enough. At least that's my experience.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions? Yeah, here.
So I don't know if we can go back to like the first slide where you had like the 4 criteria needed for like a product manager.
Yeah, but it's going to
Yeah.
take me a while.
Ah, okay. Take your time then. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So my question is this, like in a very fast-growing company, right? Do you think like the customer is still number one thing? Because I would think like the business should be number one. I'm just curious, why is the customer number one?
I mean, I separated it because the way I think about it is kind of something that I would put in this bucket is rather the market knowledge. So like this constitutes the knowledge that you have on the market, on your competitors, on the landscape, on anything that really relates to your market, like any regulatory, basically anything that can influence you. That's not yet the user of the product, but basically any factors that are in the environment. And then customers is actually the empathy, the experience, the knowledge on what they are doing with your product already and what they are struggling with that is not yet addressed. So like hence the separation, but yeah, it's very much intertwined sometimes. So.
So does that mean like in a fast-growing company, the customers is still like number one?
This is the kind of question that is really hard to give yes always answer, because it really depends. But I would say that from the examples that I saw, they are required. Like you cannot really. I mean, you cannot really grow if you don't focus on your customers and you don't really have know what they are doing, know what they are thinking, know what they struggle with, and if you only just rely on maybe some knowledge that was passed to you, then you may fall into traps that your features are not actually going to solve the problem. So I mean, it's really hard to answer this question because there can be a lot of kind of environmental factors to it. So.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. Now, information for those who are watching us online. There will be a link to the questionnaire soon. Please take your 1 minute to fill this questionnaire and tell us about your impression about our meeting. This is very important for us. And I would like to ask you here in our office to stay a little bit longer on your seats because we will have some pizza, some snacks, and time for chatting. So. Also, for our viewers online, please subscribe our all social medias, and thank you very much for your watching. Thank you very much.